Thanks everyone for joining us. Chris is our interpreter for the day. Thank you, Chris, for being here with us. Amanda just put in the chat that they're on an ancient computer that's struggling to keep up, so they're going to keep their camera off today. Thanks, Amanda, for letting us know. Okay. So I emailed everyone to let you all know that today I'm hoping to first talk about, kind of wrap up the Percent for the Arts funding discussion for fiscal year 24, 25, 26. And then I'm hoping to have time to talk to you about the potential for additional outreach to artists for the Arts and Culture Plan. So let's dive in. As a reminder, for fiscal year 25-26, our calculation so far is $311,000. Keep in mind that still needs to go through budget and final calculation, so that could change a little bit. But that's what we are looking at and talking about. And a couple ideas that really came out with a lot of support in our discussions with you all and with the City Arts team is on the Arts Bloom side, of course, having another round of Arts Bloom. But the idea of potentially having Arts Bloom funding for projects or programming specifically proposed for our centers. And then having the Capital Art Project be for art on city fleet vehicles. So garbage trucks, snow plows, other city fleet vehicles. And kind of tying that, we had a good discussion with you all last time around tying that in with other city efforts like our anti-littering campaign, our clean sweeps, and a discussion around climate change. So we're excited to connect with city staff, relevant city staff on that to really get that conversation started and investigate how much that would cost. So right now, let me go ahead and pull up the spreadsheet. One thing we didn't discuss last time that I remembered right before this meeting and then had to do some recalculating, math, hooray, was we have made the commitment to do 10% of our capital, whatever we set aside for capital art, also setting aside 10% of that amount for maintenance, for public art maintenance. So that's also in there. So let me show you the spreadsheet. Can you all see that? That is weird. It's coming up really strange on my screen. Let me retry that. Can you all see the spreadsheet?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see it. Just it's a little small, but
It's really weird. I don't understand what's happening. Hang on, be patient with me because I can't actually see it at all.
we can see it now.
All right. I can't see it, but I'll go by memory. So as you can see here, then that puts us at, I believe it's 190,000 for capital art for the city fleet vehicle art project. And then I think it's 21,000 for additional for public art maintenance, which is in addition to the 68,000 we have already set aside. And then 100,000 for Arts Bloom programming specific to our centers. So I want to open it up to discussion or feedback on that. Anyone have any questions, comments, want to discuss those details? I'm going to stop sharing and I apologize for that, but I can't see the spreadsheet. So if someone has a question about the spreadsheet, I can open it back up again for discussion, but.
So
Um,
oh, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. So I know later in the agenda there's going to be discussion about whether um the maintenance fund should be used for other artwork other than 1% fund artwork. And just a thought that I think was at 89,000 that we've already accumulated. And given that these new works of art will likely not require maintenance immediately, I just kind of urge that maybe we could be a little flexible on how that's spent, that we've got, a fair amount and will over the next year or two probably have a fair amount set aside for that with very little maintenance needs for those works, probably.
Thank you, Johanna. I know one of the topics that's come up, it's maybe not a topic for today, but a topic soon, I think, is discussing art walk projects and the
Yeah.
potential maintenance needs there. And then, as some of you remember, we are working on a public art, a map to include not just public art on city-owned properties, but also public art on private properties. And a part of that, we're also taking inventory. We're trying to really assess the condition of all the artworks to help us potentially have the larger conversation with the arts and culture plan on how to maintain public art, how to be better public art stewards, what should we prioritize, updating and remedying where those needs are. So stay tuned to that for that.
I forgot what I was going to say originally because, well, let me just first say on the art walk stuff, that discussion we should probably have sooner than later, because we've kind of been, I think, putting it off for a while, and we really kind of got to get to that. The other thing, so in the spreadsheet, what maybe I missed this because I don't know, but. So instead of the Arts Bloom kind of thing what we've been doing, we're going to specify it to the centers. Or am I, or is this in addition to what we've been doing? Or
So
can you
the
just clarify? Yeah.
yeah. So the idea is similar. So the last round, we had bonus points for youth programming. So the idea this round is that we would still do an open Arts Bloom call for art, but that it would be for proposals for programming or projects proposed for our centers only.
Uh,
We're open to discussion on that.
yeah, I mean, I'm all for the centers, of course, but I, I don't know if only narrowing it to that is, well, I would not, I wouldn't mind having a discussion about this. Can somebody maybe sway me to
Well, I'm going to jump in,
Thank you.
having
Thank you. Yeah.
served our centers for over 27 years. We are really looking at a city-focused arts plan, and the way that we can really impact the Crescent Zone, which are the 5 core zip codes in the country, is to infuse our centers with diverse programming. Our centers have been known for years for sports and now starting to emerge. And I will give a classic example of the rock music program in our centers. That started off as a very small initiative that has really accelerated brown and black youth to really consider a career in the music industry, to take up a musical instrument, to develop the skill set of discipline and practice and application, and then to allow them to showcase their talent at various levels, scaffolding their confidence and their abilities. I am 100% advocating for Arts Bloom to be centered and focused on the poorest zip codes in our city, in our country, and advocating for brown and Black artists is a very meaningful way to infuse us with diverse arts programming. And especially because the youth already go there. It's an established safe haven for them. They serve them dinner. I've been in our centers all week long advocating for voter registration. The 7 to 12-year-olds are literally busting at the seams, hungry for infusion, education, and resources. That's my 2-minute elevator speech on advocating for programming in our art centers. Thank you.
And I actually agree with you. I just wonder if using all of the Arts Bloom money in that direction is the best use of that money, though. I mean, I'm not saying we don't need to do that. I'm just saying I'm not totally convinced that that's all the responsibility of this group, though. So that's my only concern, I guess.
Thomas, I'm going to add to that. When the Arts Council existed, they were able to advocate for large chunks of grant funding that really actually paid teaching artists to go
Yeah.
into the art centers. We don't have that pipeline anymore. Even the
Mhm.
city school district's arts program have gone by the way of the wasteland. This would at least guarantee a pathway. Let's try it 1 year and see what the benefits and the results will be, not just for artists, but for the youth that we're actually intentionally, purposely, and mindfully serving.
Well said.
Yeah, if I could chime in quick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lou from Rocco. I wonder if, I guess when I hear that, this is the first time I've heard of the focus on the R centers. So I guess when I hear that, I wonder if there aren't other sources of revenue or aren't there other budget lines that the city could be utilizing for public art in the art center, since they are totally city run and controlled, whereas the public art 1% for the arts more typically is in general public space. While I understand what Sarah is suggesting, that the art center programs are open to everyone, not really I think what most people would think of as public space, a sidewalk, a park. Yeah, I guess that's just my first thought on the mandate of a 1% for the arts initiative.
I think,
Doesn't-
sorry. I want to go ahead and I can chime in a little bit, and Sarah might be able to chime in more here, but to my understanding is that right now what we use for arts programming in our centers is CDBG funding, because those zip codes are CDBG Community Development Block Grant eligible. That funding has drastically decreased, as a lot of you probably know, over the last 20, 30 years. So I think that's the challenge there. But I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything to add to that.
So just a slight, yeah, so a slight correction. So some of our arts programming, for instance, rock music, some of rock music, some of our Miller Arts rock paint program, which are also youth employment program, is paid through CDBG. That is a limited amount of funding that is able to support some portion of those programs' budgets. Any additional art programming where we're bringing teaching artists into the rec facilities or to camps or to our after-school programs, that's funding found within our program budgets and prioritizing exposing youth to arts, whether it be visual arts, dance, music, on top of what we're already doing. So there isn't any specific funding or allocated money. That's just staff and, directors prioritizing the arts and wanting kids to have that exposure and, carving it out within our budgets to make sure that kids are getting arts on top of all the other things that they'd be getting. Um, so I feel like it could be a win-win, right? We already work with a lot of the teaching artists and, in terms of like the question of performance art, that could be something where you're coming in and doing performances with kids or teaching kids how to engage in a performance. Um, I think it could be really, I like the idea of a pilot year. I think it could be really transformative in terms of what kind of art and the level to which we're able to expose kids to the arts. And I did mention all of our rec facilities are open to the public. If this did go forward, we'd be publicizing these programs, putting them out on our central. They'd be open to any City of Rochester youth by signing up for our central. They could be first-time rec participants or long-time rec participants. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Well, I'm definitely all for this. I mean, it's not like my concerns really are that that this could potentially set some kind of precedent where every time there's a deficit in something related to arts, we're going to take money out of this percent for arts and the arts bloom, and the whole idea around that gets kind of shifted a little bit. Um, and I just don't know if that's something, I agree that this needs to be funded. I'm just wondering if this is, and I agree that we could even participate in some of that funding. But to set aside $100,000 of all of the Arts Bloom money just seems, you know, I don't know. It just seems to me that it's a little bit beyond what we're not beyond, but changing a little bit of what we've been trying to do with Arts Bloom. And I don't know. I'm a little conflicted, I guess, because I mean, I certainly do want this to be funded, and and I certainly think it's a great idea. I just don't want us to get into this precedent of, oh, we really need to do this stuff over here, so let's just take money. They've got money. Why don't we? I don't know. It's
I mean, Ellen, Heather, can you break it down again how the pot is being broken down? Because I thought there was still funding for capital art projects, which would be public art installations. So we're not
Yes.
shifting the program to be just programs. We're still keeping that public art piece. Could you just break that down again? Because I just want to make sure I heard
but the
you.
public art piece is not the same thing as Arts Bloom, am I right? Or am I?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Arts Bloom
that's
is
different.
the non-capital. So right now we were looking at 100,000 for Arts Bloom specific to our centers, and then 190 for capital art, and then the remainder going to public art maintenance.
Hmm.
I do want to put in there that this is not shifting what is eligible. So when we talk about programming, we're talking about arts education, which from the very first round has been eligible for Arts Bloom funding, right? Arts Bloom has been arts education, literary arts, performing arts, temporary visual art. And the idea is that when we do a call for art, any of those things would be eligible, but just specific to our centers. However, I want to throw out there that we could have a bucket of Arts Bloom that's specific to our centers, and then another bucket that's open for other locations. I think that would be possible and still be able to have our capital art project for city fleet vehicles, partly because we have actually over 100,000 right now of percent for the arts funding that's unprogrammed, that's tagged for capital art. So we could have two buckets of Arts Bloom funding potentially. If the concern is, I think the programming is not different. So the same artists that have been eligible for Arts Bloom would be eligible for a round of Arts Bloom specific to our centers. The only difference is that it's geographically specific, right? So in the past, it's been your program can be at an art center, a library, a park, any city-owned property, or it can be private property if it's public, right? So if it's free, if there's no fee to watch it, or in provided that we are convinced that it's a public opportunity, an opportunity for the public, and publicly accessible. Does that make sense to everyone?
Well,
Like
yeah, it's just that we're cutting all that other part out, though,
yeah,
the
yeah.
specific thing. So
So
I'm just,
what about having the two buckets then? Would people feel
well,
comfortable with
can we
that?
afford to
If we
do that
had
really?
one bucket of Arts Bloom specific to our centers, and then one that was was more open.
I'm open to that. I just, can we really fund the the centers thing the way we're supposed to or wanting to if we do that? Or I guess
Um,
I'm not understanding where the pockets of money are coming from or moving to.
right. Let me, this is, I really hate that I can't see the spreadsheet when I share it, but I'm going to share it and then and I'll trust that you all can see it, because we have $118,000 of unprogrammed capital funding. Can everyone see the spreadsheet, even though I can't?
Yeah, yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think what it would be instead of having 190,000 this year for capital art, we would maybe take an additional chunk of that to have it be another bucket of open Arts Bloom funding. And then we would be able to dip into that 118,000 of unprogrammed from previous allocations. Does everyone see that
Yes.
118,000 is unprogrammed? And use that to go towards the other chunk of capital art from the next year to go towards the city fleet vehicle art.
If we could do that, I would certainly be in favor of this. I just I don't mean to be a about this, but
Oh, it's
I do
okay.
think that by narrow and it's great that we're doing that, but I just think it then cuts out a whole other potential that I think we want to keep developing and cultivating. And so that's my only concern. But if we could do it what you just said, if we could do that, I think that would be great.
Wanted to add my perspective again on that. I believe that if we're listening to artists and the artists are saying, hey, we all really want more involvement with the R centers, then to me that this would make sense. If artists were saying we love working with the R centers, we really want more of that, and those are ideal locations for what we already do, then this would be a no-brainer. But I think that our mandate, as Amanda said in the chat from the beginning, was really to scatter public art investment, especially into locations that were public art deserts, as it were, and certainly focusing on the neighborhoods where the R centers are, no doubt. But mandating the specific building or the specific location does feel like it's not necessarily being artist driven, like it's being city driven and budget driven for other reasons, which are to be respected, no doubt. But I tend to be on the perspective of where the artist's need is and where the artist's desire is. And I haven't heard that the artists are specifically saying we want more funding only to do work in the R centers. A number of the Arts Bloom projects happened in small independent centers this last time around, drawing attention and drawing visitorship to other locations. I definitely see the value of those in the past. Thank you.
Annette, you have your hand up.
Yes. So I want to speak about teaching artists in the rec centers. 20 years ago, we had a pipeline for this. We were a very well-established running machine with vetted artists that were nationally trained, that brought back resources, that infused our art centers with arts programming. And I'm not talking about a transitional one-off. I'm talking about 10 contact sessions within a art center really solidifies 10 hours of arts engagement for young people. Secondly, we are serving the poorest, most impoverished art deserts, the city, and the 5 crescent zones. Happy to share that information. It's national and known information. So with that desert of artists not being able to navigate directly within our center to present programming, that pipeline needs, or that network needs to be reestablished. And myself, Kumba Consultants, we have been in the art centers for 20 something years. Rena Golden, many of us in this group have done that. And that network and that pipeline has been broken. So to reestablish it, even with $50,000, really infuses continuity of work for artists. I'm sorry, I want a 10-session program. I don't want to nickel and dime myself to death as a teaching artist. Secondly, it will also work with the program directors in the centers. They want to be intentional about what they're offering their youth. So they work very closely with teaching artists. Right now, Paula is in the art centers. We're being very intentional with our Arts Bloom grant fund. We're doing at least 7 art centers and 3 city schools, as well as other community partners. So I think being intentional about putting money aside for rec centers is really critical to developing our brown and Black artists that live, work, and thrive in our city. So I just want to speak to that, because when I first started there was a pipeline. There's nothing there unless you know the director, Dr. Green, or the rec center coordinator, or they come to you and say, we have a little money to pay this artist to be in this rec center. So I think we do need to look at how are we curating, cultivating the next generation of competent, capable, and confident artists in our city who believe that they can make a living as an artist in our city. Thank you.
So it sounds like it's kind of a both and situation, Heather, at least from those who are being vocal now.
Yeah, I think maybe it makes sense for us to have the 2 buckets then, if that sounds good for folks. And I don't think that we need to compromise any one of these things, because we do again have the unprogrammed funding for capital from previous allocations. So I think we could still have 100,000 for our centers and still a big amount, or we gotta kind of work out the amounts of the different buckets. And so I think I'm gonna follow up with folks on this to really finalize the details and make sure everyone feels comfortable with it. But I think we at least are all on board with the idea of there's going to be our center specific Arts Bloom and open Arts Bloom, as well as the capital art project for city fleet vehicles.
Heather, it seems like if we have both buckets, that might give us an opportunity to see too if there is interest. Hearing what Blue said about not necessarily hearing that from all our artists, but Annette made a very compelling explanation why there are artists that do want to. And so maybe this gives us an opportunity to see kind of if it's an idea, because we're just saying we're doing this for one cycle of Arts Bloom. What if we find that there's a ton of interest? So that might be informative for us to consider in future years. Or if we get maybe only 1 or 2 for our centers, then maybe we need to rethink how we approach it. But having the 2 buckets might give us a chance to really play with the idea and see what we get. Because there may be people that are like, oh, I have this idea that I haven't told anybody about, or it's, there's a place for this thing I've considered. So that might spur other ideas that we aren't thinking of.
Yeah, or just one more point. Sorry, I know this always becomes a long conversation, but isn't there a way to just sort of encourage artists? So, hey, have you considered making your application to be based at the R Center, as opposed to the mandates and these kind of predetermined buckets that we're always talking about so much? Maybe there's just a way to enthusiastically direct artists who haven't worked with the R Centers to do so again, but also leaving the opportunity open for the 9th floor, for example, to have an exhibition like they did last time in their home base, drawing attention there.
And related to that, I'm wondering if we can say, okay, we have 150 or whatever the number is, 150,000 for Arts Bloom, and then we see what comes back without deciding right now, like, okay, it's going to be half and half in each bucket. Can we see what responses we get? And if there's like 75% of them are about our center and they're really great, then maybe we decide how the funding gets distributed once we see what responses we get. Or maybe that's too complicated and we decide ahead of time. I'm not sure, but it seems like there's room for that if it seemed like it could work.
I think that the alternative is the same way we did last round Arts Bloom with by giving bonus points to proposals that were for youth arts education or had a youth component in an art project. So that's the alternative. And that makes it easier to kind of do what you're talking about, Ellen, without,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the other thing I was thinking is if we did bonus points. And now you're saying that that's how the last cycle worked. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really aware that we're early on in Percent for the Arts, and I think that one of the concerns about having specific parameters instead of bonus points has been that this is kind of it's new enough that we don't want to give anyone the impression, any artists or arts organizations, the impression that this is limited in any way. So I'm aware that that's been a concern for folks, right? I think, Thomas, I seem to remember you having that concern in a prior round, right? With just, we want to make sure that people understand. We don't want to kind of, even though we could in the future have like years where we're having a very specific theme or topic or limitation, if to do that this early on in the Percent for the Arts, we don't want to give people the wrong impression about the funding in general.
I have a question, and maybe I've missed this, but do we have a mission statement? Like,
We have basically we have our two equity focused goals.
mhm.
So it's expanding the experience of art so that all Rochesterians can experience art regardless of the neighborhood they live in.
Mm-hmm.
And then increasing economic opportunities for local artists, particularly those who have been historically underrepresented. So those are our kind of core focuses right now. It's really what Percent for the Arts has kind of been built around.
I think it's fine to keep things open and flexible. And if we chose to do that for this year, I think that's fine. But I wouldn't want to outright dismiss the notion of future years having more specific parameters or themes. Because I think there is something to be said to have in any given year to say we're focused on this type of facility or this type of park or this, that sort of thing, or we're focused on this particular theme. I think there's something to be said for that in terms of having a sort of a cohesive movement that's happening in the city in a given year, whether it's location or theme based. And I think there's also, and Heather, maybe you could speak to this more. There's something to be said in terms of, the efficiency of management of these funds. We've had some challenges over the last couple of years with trying to manage things that are totally wide open. And that's not always the most efficient use of staff trying to do their best with this work. So just something to think about.
Just one more pitch. I also think that, Blue, you mentioned a couple of them, but there's probably other opportunities for public members to create art that go into larger exhibitions. And, the Ninth Floor Collective, I know you guys do the big art piece with public art being submitted. Like there's lots of opportunities where rather than just some staff at the rec center or the library working with kids on something like that, like actually having artists help kids who maybe have a proclivity towards art to develop pieces that could be put into those sorts of public shows as like their first opportunity to have their art seen in public. That could also be part of this so that both entities, both the public adult, Ninth Floor Collective is benefiting from having some publicity, but also the kids in the facility are getting an opportunity to like create art with an artist, put that art on public display, bring their families or whomever to the art showing and have that experience. That's a huge moment for a kid who maybe doesn't have anyone in the rec center who understands or appreciates art in that same way, I think those opportunities are, you can't put a price tag on that sort of thing. So I would just put that out there as well as a possibility for how to make this work.
Okay, so if everyone has had a chance to share,
I do have a question. I'm gonna jump on the mic for a second.
yeah.
So if we're talking about presenting exhibition opportunities for youth to create art, be exposed to art, and then partnering with an organization possibly to exhibit their artwork, would this be available beyond the art centers? Because there are already organizations in the city of Rochester doing this really successfully. Like, it wouldn't have to be built from scratch in our center. For example, the Flower City Art Center, in their photography program, they have over a decade of proven track record in building youth engagement in the arts, creating a pipeline of from youth to college for arts, creating a strong high school graduation record of people who participate in their programs. And that's essentially what they're doing, is giving these kids the opportunity to learn photography and then exhibit their photography. So right now they're I think they're still up at the Eastman Museum, and they've also exhibited at City Hall pretty regularly. So I feel like, if talking about giving youth exhibition opportunities, giving youth the abilities to learn how to be an artist top to bottom, like, there's already orgs in the city that are doing that really, really successfully. And I think we need to keep that option. I feel like it would be too limiting to say this is just for the art centers, because we have that youth programming that already exists in the city of Rochester.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Okay, if everyone, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I guess, to address your question, Amanda, I think in hypothetically that spaces like that could be eligible, as Heather said earlier, so long as they demonstrate that they're publicly accessible and that it's free or reasonable for the public to attend, that those spaces and those organizations would be eligible. But if it is a space like you're describing, or some other artist studio or something like that, and it's open to the public for, $15, then, that's not going to score very well. So there is opportunity, I think, for organizations like that to participate.
And I'll add to that too, Amanda. I feel like we haven't had many proposals for exhibitions. So in the next call, I want to make sure to call that out as an example of what we mean by temporary visual art, or by visual art, because we've gotten a lot of proposals. Very few have been for a temporary exhibition. So I want to make sure people have that understanding that that's an eligible project. Okay, so it seems like what we're going towards is Arts Bloom having bonus points for projects that are proposed for art centers, and having a larger bucket than 100,000. So I'll follow up with folks to kind of fine tune to get the final totals for the Arts Bloom and the non-capital and capital art. This has been a great conversation. I do wish we could think about Art Walk as well, but I want to get to this other item first, which is the artist outreach for the arts and culture plan. So as you all know, we've had Designing Local has done a lot of one-on-one interviews. The artist engagement team has done some pop-ups and events. We've led some pop-ups and community meetings and an event. Our last community meeting is a virtual meeting tonight. As a side note, help us get the word out. I'll follow up with the registration link to have you guys help us get the word out. And some people at those pop-ups, some of the people we've been talking to in all of those different modes have been artists. In addition, we have the survey. We're up to 419 surveys completed. I really want to get that 1,000. I want to get 1,000 completed. But of the 419 that we have so far, one short of 420. I just want to point out, someone do that next survey to get us to 420. 228 were done by people that identify as artists. So more than half of the surveys done are done by artists, which is an exciting thing. We were considering additional modes of outreach specific with artists. And one potential is focus groups. We haven't really done any focus groups, and we were assuming we would be doing focus groups with artists anyway. Additionally, we were considering having a large convening of artists to kind of talk about the broad topics and then having the focus groups to get more specific. However, we really wanted to bring it up with you all because we recognize that Rock Arts United is having a focus group with Designing Local at the end of this month. There's the Arts Hub conversations that are coming up. You all have done one-on-one interviews with us. We don't want to, we're very aware of, planning fatigue or survey fatigue. So we don't, if folks feel like they've had a chance to talk to us and give us some feedback, maybe a large convening is the wrong format. Maybe it really is just doing some focus groups to try to reach other artists that we haven't talked to yet. So I want to open it up to kind of comments and thoughts from you all on the different ideas for reaching additional artists.
I guess I am supposed to be more on top of this than I am. But so I've sort of passed things along to people, but was there like a Instagram or Facebook kind of like post that you can click to? I may have missed it, I guess. There was. Okay. Sorry, I missed it. So, because that to me, I would have been doing that if I had not missed it, I guess. So, yeah, but you're talking to the part about, there's the hub meeting that we're kind of convening things, there's all these different convenings going on. And so I do think you're right that we need to kind of not oversaturate. However, I mean, with that being said, I think there's people we're not reaching, actually, artists
Right.
that we're not reaching. And so I just wish we could figure that out a little bit better. I don't know the answer to that exactly, but I'm sure there are, artists out there that have no idea that there's a, survey going on. And I don't know what the answers to that is, but
Thomas, one of our efforts to organize this Rock Arts United specific focus group was to try to achieve some of that, because Rock Arts United has sort of been trying to specifically reach those artists who feel and or are not particularly engaged with organizations or may not be aware of this survey. That's kind of what Rock Arts United does. So it felt like a way for Rock Arts United to aggregate and collect many artists' input from over the last few years and be able to speak to what their priorities and needs are. That's just one thing we did.
I mean, maybe that's a model for how we try to reach other artists, right? Maybe it's connecting with the different artist collectives and having focus groups with those groups. That's one way, right? Yes, no. Maybe.
You're asking me?
Yeah, you or anyone.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't see any disadvantage to it. It's more about, I guess, the efficiency of it. I think the reason why we were driving for Rock Arts United to do this, because this Rock Arts United is sort of like an arts council, an emerging and nascent one for sure. But it specifically has a mandate to represent artists, not a collective per se. I do think there's a line to draw there. It's not an artist collective. with
Right.
say 10 members who are all exhibiting their work or something like that. Rock Artists United is attempting to be the artists council to represent artists in issues related to creating a more just, a more equitable, more robust arts community. And it's been doing that work and laying the foundation for I think 5 or 6 years now. So that's why it felt
Yeah.
like an organization that kind of sets a different it has a different mandate than some of the artist collectives per se.
Got it. But I think what I'm hearing is maybe convening isn't the right strategy. Maybe it is a handful of focus groups where we're using the different networks to hopefully connect with artists
I
that we
think you're
haven't
right
connected with
about that.
before.
Yeah, I think that actually is a good direction, a positive direction.
I guess one concern that we would have about that though is I think that while we definitely should make a concerted effort to meet more with collectives and other representative groups, I think there are plenty of artists in the Rochester community that don't necessarily identify with those groups or feel like they're part of them or wouldn't know how to be part of them. I can think of artists that I know that they're just kind of out there doing their own thing. So and they're not necessarily looking to, they don't feel the margin necessarily, or maybe for other reasons to meet with collections of other artists. So how do we make a space that invites them in, that is open to all artists and creatives, regardless of whether or not they feel like they have connected with a group of any kind?
Well, no, I mean, you can still do open forums. I mean, I don't think you have to do
Well, that's
one.
what the convening was, that she was talking about.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, well, I think kind of we need both of these things, though, right? I mean, I don't think there's a downside to doing both of these kinds of things, right? Except that just organizing them is, but
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know.
and I just that we're really aware there's a lot of outreach going on right now. And art specific, there's arts hub conversations, but there's also
Yeah.
we've just been encountering that the city is doing a lot of outreach on like multiple other projects. And so we're having a hard time. We're finding a lot of fatigue from
That's-
people in the community at large with just the amount of outreach that's going on about it's the pre-winter explosion, right? Of like people connecting. So that was our concern, was that are we gonna try to have this large convening and then only get
Question.
5 people that show up?
Question. The goal of like the convening of the focus groups is essentially to get the information, like the kind of information that we're looking for in the survey, or like asking artists is that like what we're trying to get out of those meetings and focus, like what would those meetings and focus groups look like? Um, and how would we use the information that we get from them? How would we collect the information, and how do we use that information?
So usually it's about note taking, and in a large convening, we could have breakout groups where each group is coming up with a lot of responses to very targeted specific questions. And the difference between a survey and a focus group or even a convening is that the survey, you're getting a lot of the same data in
Yeah.
terms of the survey, but you're diving deeper into it. And it's a
And
more deep qualitative conversation where you're getting
Mhm.
some of the nuances of conditions and what people experience. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, I guess like the thing like for me, like with the focus groups versus like the large convening, the focus group, if it included primarily like the leaders of those of like organizations and stuff, if there's more than one focus group, then yes. But like if we focus solely on like the leaders of organizations, I question if it will become kind of like a game of telephone, because then we would want them to bring it to their organizations. We'd want them to bring in the artists who are part of that. And then we would be relying on them to bring that information to them, unless we're also preparing what bringing that information to them looks like, because we wouldn't just want to collect information from them if we want a broader range of that information. And yes, those leaders do represent their artists, but we're all still human. And so I think that leaders in those spaces will not represent all of the people that they represent with their groups and organizations. Sorry, my brain is like percolating while I'm speaking. So it's like, um, yeah, that's my only thing with the focus groups. But a convening with like breakout rooms, like I had put that note down, because then it would also allow us to see how, because I know like a lot of times when we're questioning like how we're going on like where funding is going, like what kind of projects we want to do, it's like what other kind of projects can we do outside of like visual art and stuff. I think that doing something like that and getting that direct feedback from maybe like non-visual artists could also help a lot when we're having those questions, because then we're getting it direct. We're seeing how it looks like. This is like this focus group is for vocal artists or like musicians. This focus group is for etc. Because that is going to look different, like what their needs are. And with the survey, we may not always get that information, even though like we do have questions that help with that. I think having one event where it's like we break out, because essentially we'll be getting the focus groups as part of a larger event, if that makes sense. We would get both of them in one
Yeah, that's true.
for efficiency. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just to speak to that a little bit, I think in the focus groups, like for example, Rock Arts United, I just use as example, but it doesn't have to be the leaders particularly of those groups, and I think actually that probably isn't the right way to go. But it's sort of convenient, or I guess you're not using that word, focus group, doing a group focus with just that group, and so whoever's part of that or whatever, so that's one idea, which I think actually is a good one. Just from a political standpoint, I just think that that's a good idea. The larger convening or the convening that I guess I'm not exactly clear the difference between focus and convening, but the convening, could be also like you're saying, music or vocals or whatever, or one could be, dance and what, so you could do it that way as well. And I mean, even though those require, I think, a little bit more attention on how to figure that out, I think in the long run, that's actually good because you are, by specifying in a way or narrowing it a little bit, I think people tend to be more interested in something for me. And so the attention people give to that is a little bit more personal, I think, than, we want all artists to just come and talk to us. So, I mean, that's just my thinking, and it's probably more complicated to put that together. But I think to get the more substantive information, that is maybe a really good way to go.
Okay, I think, yeah, we have some stuff to think about. And Thomas, just the idea of the convening was a large in-person meeting with artists. And then the focus groups would be, usually with a focus group, you have between 10 and 20 people having like a focused conversation about something, usually closer to 10 people, but yeah, okay. So we don't really have very much time to talk about Art Walk now. I do agree that it's something we need to talk about sooner rather than later. So maybe
Well, we
that
could
will
put
be,
it on the agenda for the next time. It's okay.
yeah,
What we do, I just want to keep in our minds that there's all that art on the street on University Avenue that nobody is taking care of anymore. And anyway, we just need to figure that out.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so it's on the agenda for next AC3. We all also have a steering committee. Oh, sorry, Kevin, you have your hand up.
I just want to add something before we ended, but go ahead and finish that thought, Heather.
Yeah, we have a steering committee meeting on November 4th for the Arts and Culture Plan. So those of you who are on AC3 and a couple of the staffers here, we'll see you on November 4th for the steering committee for the Arts and Culture Plan, at which we will talk about, it'll be closer to the end of outreach, so we'll have more of an update just on outreach process and hopefully beginnings of some findings. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks. Yeah, I just really want to emphasize with the non-city staff folks here, whatever we decide in terms of these focus groups or convening or whatever form these meetings take, we really, really appreciate any help that you can offer in helping spread the word. We're going to do our very best with the resources that we have here at the city to get the word out about these things, but you all are so well connected to other artists that whatever form this takes, we really need to rely on you folks and the rest of the steering committee too. So the AC3 and the steering committee to really help us spread the word and we got to cast this net as far and wide as possible there's so many artists in our community that are just not connected the way you all are. And we really want to hear from them. So please, please, please help us when the time comes, and we'll provide you those materials.
Okay, great. Thank you all again so much. Happy rest of your Tuesday. Have a good lunch. Enjoy the sunshine in the window that we have it, and we'll all see you soon. Thank you.